Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's Equity Board meeting. It's scheduled for 6 p.m. on Wednesday, May the 3rd. We have a number of members online and we have a number of members in the room. We do have quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. On today's agenda, we're going to call to order. We have a set time for public comments as well as the approval of minutes. Most important today, though, we do have a number of agenda items, which is the virtual attendance policy follow-up presented by Mayor Mary Polly and Tisha Geiser, our city clerk, as well as the capital improvement plan follow-up. Okay, I'm not going to run through every agenda item right now, but we'll just go and follow through on the agenda. But let's go ahead and welcome our new members. So, Archie, would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm Arthur Kashina, recent relocated from California, and I work as a scientist. Of course, from the diverse background, born and raised in India, lived in the UK and Europe.
Board members, we're so excited to have Karthik. As you might remember from our last meeting, Karthik is our newest equity board member, as Lisa transitioned out last month. From expired and she was able happy to have Karthik with us. And so with that, I thought that it might be helpful for Karthik if all of you introduce yourself. We can sometimes him at the end. See if you can.
Hi, I'm Mayor Mary Polly. I had the great honor of helping stand up this first version of our equity board and participating in interviews. But now they're established, so I don't do that anymore. And I'm just here tonight to share some news, talk about virtual attendance that I probably won't be. Welcome. My name is Issaquah. I used to be part of the Food Services Commission that worked to establish the board. I moved from that commission to and originally from raised in LA. Professionally, I am probably best known as just someone volunteers a lot in the community. Yeah, I wear different hats. Nice to meet you.
I'm Andrea Snyder. I'm the deputy minister. I've been with the state for a total of 9 years now, and as deputy city administrator, I help oversee public works and development departments and long-term capital plan. Welcome.
Especially I work for here.
Board members, we have a request from online to speak up a bit. I also
Is it Karthik? Welcome. My name is Kelly Munn, and this is going to be my second committee board, and I am retired and have in the past spent most of my life organizing a community member, typically locally, but also statewide, around education.
Confessions, California confessions.
This is my 23rd year and
I was actually the winning, yeah.
and I'm I came back after but I also actually working up the street before they changed it from park and it was Issaquah Middle School. I decided to teach. So I've been doing that for years.
I am a veteran of the U.S. Army. Currently, I work for Microsoft and a curriculum program. My background is technical as well as been on the equity board since its inception. I'm really excited about where things are going, where we want to go. Making Issaquah a more equitable place for all. So it's great to see a new member on the board, and it's great to see like how Issaquah started to transform. Because I've been here in 2015 to San Francisco, California. So to see it transform from a town in which I moved to, where the only person of color that I pretty much saw. So I didn't see that here that I got here because I just stay up in the Highlands, right? So I was like the only person of color I saw was my face in the mirror every single day when I go somewhere. So it's nice to see now that I come down here, Park Street, every other place in Issaquah, and see us grow. The smile, they're like, hey, how you doing? But it's just amazing. So I'm glad you're here. Oh, yes. And online, Shay, would you like to introduce yourself? Sure.
Shay, do you mind before you go? We have the from interpreters. We see your hand up, Hillary.
I'm sorry, Monica. None of us are able to hear very clearly. I believe Shay is nodding, but Christina said that the volume isn't high enough to hear, and neither can we hear to interpret.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. We'll try to problem solve a little bit here. Maybe that's
And we can hear you well, Monica. We just can't hear others around you.
Oh, it could be that the.
It might be just picking up yours. Yeah.
We can hear, it seems like we can hear better now.
Okay.
Tony, can you try saying something?
Sure, this is Tony Curry, test 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes, we can hear now, much better. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Okay, so Shay, our illustrious leader.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shay Fleming. I am the Equity Board Chair, and Kartik, I think if you remember, I helped interview you. So I'm happy that you decided to join. I have been with the Equity Group since its inception as well, and I was voted in as the chair, which I'm very honored to have been able to serve. I am originally a transplant from St. Louis, Missouri. I have lived here for almost 5 years now. And my kids attend school in the Issaquah School District. And I have deep roots in DE and I work. So I was eager to be a part of this team, and it was important for me to help develop a presence for our group to be able to share ideas and become what we are today. So welcome to the team, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Shay.
All right.
Christina is also on.
Christina. Oh, Christina. And Christina, you're on mute. We can see you, Christina, but we can't hear you. You're still on mute.
No, you can hear? Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? Buenas tardes. Qué gusto verles. Mi nombre es Cristina Bonce.
Hello, good afternoon. It's nice to see you all. My name is Cristina Abonce.
I am happy to be here.
Christina.
Monica, do we have another new member that was?
No, we have a new youth member. They were not able to join tonight. They have a college class that they are taking as part of their high school class. But they are hoping to be able to adjust and start joining next month.
That sounds great. Hopefully we'll see our new youth member next month. That's great. Okay, so I'm assuming, Monica, this will serve as our roll call, so to speak. Okay, that sounds great. All right, so as we welcome our new members, are there any public comments? Anyone signed up for public comments?
No one signed up formally for public comments. I do have a public comment follow-up that we received a few weeks ago that I would like to discuss with you briefly, and then I'm hoping that we can postpone it towards the end of the meeting to have a more conversation. You may recall that a few weeks ago, we received a public comment via email, and actually the public comment was sent directly to City Council. The Equity Board was included in that feedback, and it had to do with the community engagement toolkit, and there was a request that the communication staff will bring that item back to you as an equity board member, as an equity board. So I checked in a little bit with the communications staff. They took your input, they gathered input from other departments, and they also went to City Council to gather input. They are now working on finalizing the toolkit, but since that is an internal document, they did not feel that it needed to come back to the equity board before going to council, since it wasn't anything that needed to be adopted. With that, the communication team will bring back information to you in a couple of months once that implementation is going to start to see what corrections need to be made. So that's the feedback from public comment, and I would love to take a second piece of information that I learned from the public member that made that comment and that public comment, because they gave us actually some helpful information about the process of the equity board that I would like to have the opportunity to discuss with you towards the end of the meeting, if that's okay. So it was just a process suggestion, and I think it's definitely helpful.
Okay.
So
Thank you for
okay,
that.
that concludes no other public comment.
Thank you very much for that, Monica. Okay, so for everyone in the room, I'd like to draw your attention to the minutes that Monica passed out. And for those of you online, please have a look at the meeting minutes that was sent out in the invite online. So go ahead and we'll give some time for you to overlook the minutes from the last meeting.
And with that, I apologize and thank you so much for that. I would like to request as a staff if we could postpone the minutes from tonight and review them only next month. Reasoning for that, since we had a meeting just a week ago, we didn't have enough time to receive the Spanish translations. And so Christina did not have a Spanish version of the minutes. So our translators are working on that as soon as possible, and we'll have them for next month, if that's okay. And if you don't mind, just saying that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll do that next month. All right, so let's move on to our next agenda item, which is the virtual attendance policy follow-up presented by our awesome mayor and Tisha Geiger.
Thanks. Tisha, do you want to start off, or can I do some introductory comments first? Okay, great. Well, thank you for giving me a spot on the agenda this evening. I appreciate it. At least once a year, I try and get face to face in the room with all of you, time to chat outside, and if I get to stay long enough, time to chat after. So thank you for that. Monica, I'm going to stray off the attendance policy for just a little bit with if everybody's okay with that. Monica has kept me up to date on the amazing work that you've been doing from the beginning. And this is just such a point of pride for me that we have stood up this board, that you are working on amazing items on your work plan. And I get to go share that out with other cities who have not yet stood up a board or started this work. Almost all jurisdictions have started some sort of training, but haven't really embraced the idea of having an advisory board like this take a hard look at other things besides just training opportunities on equity, inclusion, and diversity and welcoming. So thank you. You are pioneers for us, but you are also pioneers in the region, and I get to share a lot of your work with them. One of the items that just gets totally wowed about is the calendar that you came up with, and the fact that we were able to remove certain days off of our scheduled calendar to ensure that everybody could participate that might like to participate. And as you see, many times people do not choose to come to these meetings, but you are providing the opportunity for them to. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you for all the work and welcome again. When I got to Issaquah 30 years ago, I moved from a suburb of Toronto that was very diverse, and my kids went to a very diverse school where they were in the majority by about 3 or 4%. So it was a fantastic opportunity. And one of my big concerns coming to Issaquah was the reputation for the school district was great, but it was also 97% Caucasian. And I thought that's challenging for me, having had them in a district in a community that was so diverse. Issaquah has grown its diversity mostly through adding new neighborhoods. So adding the Highlands and adding Tallis and adding that population there has really diversified our population more than I could have hoped for. And that's great. However, we still kind of feel like different areas. We do not feel like one large blended city. And we have tons of opportunity, not just within our city organization, but within our community to work on being more welcoming. I still get anecdotal stories. I got a lot during COVID. I got a lot during the death of George Floyd about things that actually happened in town that had impacts on people. I still get those stories. I didn't used to get them. So I know we have a lot of work to do, and some organizations are now asking me to come and just tell them what we're doing as a city with our equity board and our administration, so that smaller organizations may start to embrace some of the stuff and the work that you are doing. So I am invited to a future Downtown Issaquah Association meeting. One of their members works in diversity, equity, and inclusion and doesn't want to be the board for, she signed up to do board work, but she doesn't want to be their DEI consultant. And so I'm just going to come and tell them about some of the work that you're doing, some of the training I'm getting. I serve on a professional association's diversity, equity, inclusion team, the Sound Cities Association, which is all the cities around Seattle, 38 cities, 1 million population, and I work on their equity cabinet. I'm hoping at some point in time to get on the Association of Washington Cities, which represents all the cities, diversity, equity, and inclusion board as well. So just sharing a lot of the stuff that I learned from you all, sharing the work that you do, it's very inspiring. So the attendance policy, the virtual attendance policy, we stood up 2 new boards, the equity board and the environment board. And we started off in an all virtual world, and you guys just hit the ground running. Coming back, many of our boards who existed pre-COVID were excited to get back in the room. They wanted to have those parking lot conversations before and after again, as well as the opportunity to talk to community members who might come in early. They're coming to talk to you, but they catch you out here and they catch you here for 5 minutes on 3 other things that they're not going to mention in their comments. And so our city clerk worked really hard with all of our boards and commissions to adopt virtual attendance policies. your adopted version is a little different than others, and for a good reason. You want to make sure that we don't take steps that start to put up walls and barriers again to coming. In practice, you are actually very similar in your practice to the other board's policies. You usually have more of your members in person. You usually have a quorum of your members in person, and the room feels filled out. And if I was coming to talk to you, I'd feel really good tonight because there's a lot of you here, and I can, grab one of you in the parking lot if I feel I need to hammer on my point a little bit more after. But you did adopt a different policy, and Tisha's just here to explain it. We're not asking you to change it. She just wants to talk to you about what is going on with the other boards and commissions and where they are. And at some future date, if you feel like your practice matches the broader policies that are out there and you want to adjust your policy, go ahead. But it's really just to do that, just to let you know where everybody else landed. And especially with the environment board and the equity board, because you grew up in a computer instead of doing this. And so one thing that would help me before we move on to the professional stuff, the people who know what they're talking about, is tell me your personal experiences with the in-person and the virtual, what you like, what you don't like, what is working, why having this virtual option is important, and what it feels like just to be in the room. And so informally, anybody who wants to chat, let's do that, and then I'll bring the profession to the table. And I love it that you have translation services and that they work, whether it's virtual or in person. We don't have that right now on our other boards and commissions. So, well, because they are not as diverse as the sport yet.
Good.
Yet.
So, Mayor Polly, I do have a, and this is just for me, so I'm not speaking for the whole board, it's just Tony Curry talking. The virtual component is important to me because of my work. I'm frequently busy, like sometimes stopping work at 11 p.m. And so what helps me is that it was advantageous and fortuitous that I was able to actually come here tonight. But some nights I'm not able to. Like I will scarf down some food real quick and then just get into the meeting. And so if we went to a format in which it was in person only, there'd be a lot of meetings I would miss. To me personally, I would have to resign.
Yeah,
I would have to. So I think just having that mix and that, and I think we're all, and I'm not speaking for the board, it's just me. I think we're all professional. We're definitely all adults. And I think as long as we make sure that if we can't be here in person, that we notify Monica or we notify Shay as the chair or me as vice chair, and that there's some type of notification or something like that. But that's just me. That's just me talking.
That's awesome. The council did adopt on Monday night their own virtual policy. And Tisha can probably explain that when she's up here too. But coming out of COVID, we've kind of decided virtual is just part of us. Yeah. It's just how much virtual. So, there are a lot of entities that I work with that are demanding everybody come back. I don't see us ever doing that, ever. We have opened so many doors with virtual attendance that in one way, shape, or form, we're going to do it. As mayor, what I'm hoping is that we can have as much consistency, and that is so that those who do participate get the same sense of vibrancy they get meeting to meeting to meeting. So it's here forever. I mean, I would never advocate for all in person. I think those days are gone, and I'm frankly quite happy that they're gone. So thank you for that. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Sure.
Oh, we got two. Yeah.
Sure. So for me, it's always about asking the question, like, who's not in the room? Who would we like in the room? Okay. And so when I put it in under that lens, for me, I think of people who can't drive, people who need to use public transport, whatever the reason being that they need to do it virtually, and wanting them to be able to participate. And in addition to that, I can tell you that I have been able to participate on the board from the Netherlands and I think some other part of the country, I can't remember, or part of the world. And so when I think about like being able to draw in a diverse pool of people who participate on this board, for me, it's just very imperative that we have that flexibility. And also there's like an unspoken, I believe, I don't know that it's part of the policy, that we all make a concerted effort to be here, right? If we're able to be here, we will be here. I don't know that it needs to be spelled out, but if for whatever reason, be it transportation, be it childcare, be it whatever it is, right? Making sure that the people that we're trying to include are given that opportunity. And I think that that goes hand in hand with the policy that we have regarding the stipend, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that we have a diverse pool of people and not just people who happen to have, the time or whatever, to be here.
Well said.
So that's why I think I voted the way that I did.
Very well said.
I would, exactly what she said, and I would add, I think there is a difference in policy and practice, because you see we've got very full rooms,
Yeah.
but I think it's really important to have a policy be open, so it is inclusive and welcoming for folks who don't have the same types of accessibility, to be able to participate in this type of engagement with city government. So to me, it's really important that it stays in policy, regardless of practice.
That's great, Pooh. Shay?
Hi, yes. And as the chair, I can probably echo a lot of the things that everyone in the room said, including the fact that my work schedule can be a little crazy sometimes. But I also have kids that sometimes their schedules interrupt mine. And for example, even tonight, I was unable to make it in person because my son's sick. And unfortunately, I just didn't want to bring any germs into anybody so that we could all remain healthy. But not only that, this option gave me the ability to be able to still participate and still join my colleagues and help our city as much as I possibly can, despite the fact that I can't be there. And yes, there are recordings, and yes, there are other ways that I can certainly get that information, but there's nothing like being a part of the group when things are happening and being able to express any comments that I have, even in the virtual setting. Which is really kind of nice. And I think that our group does a really great job of making sure that everyone's voice is heard, whether they're in the room or virtually. And I know that sometimes that can be hard, but I think we've done a good job of making it work.
Shay, that's great. You brought up something that I hear everywhere, is that we'll never be able to make it work well enough, that the people on the screen, we were talking about this 3 months into COVID, the people on the screen will never have the same experience. They will feel like it's not fair, they're not being heard, and I think we're way past that. I think I have heard from Monica, you guys do a great job making sure everybody's heard, all the voices are heard, and that's great. But it was a really big sort of, downside that people were talking about before we had the opportunity to come back. But I think we've worked it out. And I've heard you guys do a good job. That's great. Anybody else? Awesome. Well, thank you for letting me come tonight. I'm going to give my chair over to the professional. She's going to talk a little bit about where we are as a city. And thanks for all that you're doing and all that you're working on. It's nice to see everybody. And welcome. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have?
I'll just something really short.
Okay, because maybe she doesn't have.
Yeah, I don't have a formal presentation, but I'll just follow up, with, hi, everybody.
Nice to see everybody.
Kartik, I'm Tisha Geezer. I'm the city clerk. I think I've met everyone else in here a few times. It's nice to be with you again. So I'll just follow up on the mayor's comments that yes, you have emerged as somewhat unique among our other boards and commissions. So we have had 7 boards and commissions adopt a virtual attendance policy, and yours is definitely far more flexible and emphasizing that your policy says we don't care how you participate, virtually or in person. All of our other boards really emphasize that in-person attendance, and most of them have a requirement that a certain number be in the room, which was, is the mayor's, has been her position. She wants to make sure that as our community comes to these meetings, they see folks together, and that synergy that she talked about with the public and with each other is there. Also respecting that you had some clear direction, and and respecting that. So I'll just say that over the next year, maybe towards the end of 2023 or first quarter 2024, it would be good to talk again about your virtual attendance policy, see how things are going, see what some of the norms have been, and see if any adjustments might be made. So that's all I have to say. You have a big agenda tonight, so.
Yes, real quick, I think that I just want to drop just so that like a buzz in your ear that I would challenge the other boards to actually look at our policy, because our policy is more inclusive. And I would like those boards to consider, if you want to diversify your board, you need to be flexible in terms of who you're including, how you're including them, and why you're including people. So yes, I welcome, us having this discussion again in the hopes that we can model that this works and encourage other boards to actually change their policy.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm glad you said that, That's, because we as an equity board, this is kind of what we do, model behavior that, and encourage behaviors in the city. So yeah, I definitely echo that, yeah. And we encourage every board to follow, because that model fits equity so that everyone can be included. All voices heard, everyone is heard, everyone can participate. People want to come into a room, well, like me, then yeah, by all means do so.
Noted.
Thank you. I have something anyway, it would be interesting to track somehow the diversity within the boards. And now we're obviously starting way more diverse, but do they, if there's some that have lesser strong, do they add more people, right? It would be worthwhile, if nothing else, to know what the ratio is now and what the ratio is next recruitment, right?
Yeah, and we are tracking some of that information now in our application.
Yeah, and to also ask people why they, somehow to ask those who may have been interested why they didn't apply or why they decided not to do it, right?
Yeah.
I know that's more work. I'm just trying to figure out how to, because that's the real deal. I mean, the problem is the people who, they just think they can't do it, right? That they're like one of our problems, or don't know about it. So.
Yeah, and we do now have 7 boards, and I expect we'll have up to 9 who do have virtual attendance. So there is some allowable attendance, but it is not quite as open-ended as the equity boards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Tisha, thank you very much.
Yeah, it was
Appreciate
nice
your
to see
time.
you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to our next agenda item, the capital improvement plan follow-up. And this will be presented by Andrea Snyder, our deputy city administrator.
Yes, hi.
And Andrea, do you prefer questions at the end, or do you prefer questions as people have them, or how do you prefer?
Questions as you have them are
Okay.
great,
Okay.
are great. I think, so before this meeting, my laptop was starting to heat up and wasn't charging. It may be solved. We'll see if it starts to melt the table, or burst into flames. We might have to switch to, maybe Monica can share my slides, but we'll try this for now and see how far it takes us.
Okay.
So good evening. Thank you for having me here. Also with me is Robert Hamoud, who is our Chief Financial Officer. And so he'll be assisting with the presentation today. I'm so happy to be here. This is a follow-up to the discussion for those of you who were able to join us at what we called our board summit in February to talk about the CIP. CIP, Capital Improvement Plan. That's the plan that we make. It's a 6-year plan and then some to plan out our infrastructure needs and how we're going to supply all of our infrastructure needs across the city. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We started off this conversation back in February to talk about what are some of the criteria we should be thinking about to evaluate these projects that go into our infrastructure plan or CIP. And so many of you participated in that conversation. Thank you. And this is a follow-up. We now finally have a draft. It just got issued on Monday. So many of you in your packets, because the packet was actually published really before our CIP was even out, you'll see in your packet you have a bunch of different attachments. That's because that was before we even had a compiled draft. And so we gave you what we had at the moment. So apologize for all those attachments, but hopefully that helps you focus on the things that we're really talking about today. And so the agenda for this item tonight, we want to first talk to you about, well, what kind of feedback are we looking at receiving from you tonight? Then we're going to go into a little bit of background on the CIP process as a refresher. We will also give an overview of the draft or proposed CIP that covers the years 2024 to 2029. We'll have that discussion and feedback section, and we'll also talk about next steps as well. So what we're hoping to hear from you tonight, here's our general discussion questions. First, we want to have feedback on how the criteria were applied. We're specifically going to be focusing on the equity criteria tonight. That is your area of expertise. It's a brand new criteria for us that we hadn't had before in this process. So we want to hear from you. How have we applied it? Do you have feedback for us? Should we consider things differently? Were there things that surprised you in taking a look at the materials for tonight? And then if we were to use these criteria to get, again, specifically the equity criteria, again, what changes should we consider? Should we consider changes to the equity criteria itself? Should we consider changes to how we applied that criteria or thinking about it? So a little background before we get to that discussion is just a reminder of what the CIP is. The CIP is not a budget. It is a planning document. So this is something that covers the next 6 years of our planning for infrastructure, but also some out years past those 6 years. And so this graphic should look familiar to those of you who were part of the board summit that we had in February. At the top of the graphic shows that 20-year big vision picture. We have a lot of infrastructure plans that talk about 20 years or several years out. So we have our master mobility plan that talks about transportation. We have park strategic plan, all types of different infrastructure plans that give a big vision, an idea for what types of projects we should consider to improve our infrastructure. During that process, there's a lot of community engagement to form those plans. That's a time when we think about what are these policies. It's time to think about equity. It's time to think about environmental sustainability and all of our other values and incorporate them in that master planning process. Then once we have those big master plans for our infrastructure, we use those to populate the 6-year CIP. And that's really the document that we're discussing tonight. And so that's where we are on this graphic. We're in that middle trapezoid, lighter green box. And so that's where we form the CIP that's based off of those master infrastructure plans, that's based off of community feedback during the CIP process that we're forming right now, or we're in right now, and community engagement we've had over the years. You know, sometimes we'll get neighborhoods that come before us and say, well, this isn't in a master plan, but we really think we need sidewalks here, or something like that. So we incorporate all that feedback and figure out what we can afford to do, what we have the time and capacity to do, and put that into our 6-year CIP, along with the criteria that we'll talk about in a second. And then out of that 6-year CIP, how does that get to implementation? Then we form our 2-year budget. So it's a planning document, the CIP. It's not a budget, but we use it to help form our budget. Our budget covers 2 years. We're in our first year of our budget right now. So we take items out of those CIP and say, okay, here are the projects that we had planned for 2023. Our revenue picture may be better than what we had thought. Maybe it's worse. Now it really becomes a lot more real in terms of what we can afford, what do we have the capacity to do. So sometimes you'll find that things change from the 6-year CIP to the 2-year budget. That can happen because it's just a planning document. It's not an implementation document. So then what's in the budget then becomes a funded capital project. Then that's something that goes on our work plans and we start to really implement. So that's kind of the process for how do we get to actually paving a road or putting in a new water line. That's kind of the flow of that process. And again, we're in that middle light green trapezoid area right now. And all throughout this process, we want to be thinking, as I said, about equity. We want community engagement. We want to be thinking about all of our other values too. So this isn't just the one point in time where we have to get it right. We have to get it right in every step. And so, so any questions on the planning process for our capital infrastructure?
You might be discussing this in your presentation, but how do you prioritize? Like, once you have, you know, the items for the 6-year plan, but then you meet up with the finances, like how?
Yeah, well, it's almost like you're a fan. And it's a perfect segue.
Okay.
Well, it's perfect segue for this slide, so hold on to it. I'm
Okay,
not quite
okay.
there, but great question.
Okay.
And if I'm gonna come back to that question, how we prioritize. I wanna make just a little note to make sure I do that. Okay,
I'll
great.
remind you.
Good, yes, please do, please do. Before we get to that excellent question, a little bit more background. So the CIP, we update every 2 years. We go through a big update process. And so here we are within that 2-year cycle. And a couple of things have changed since the last time we adopted the CIP. One of the things that have changed is this lovely group of people. We didn't have an equity board 2 years ago, certainly not the way that you're functioning now. We also didn't have an environmental board the way that they are functioning now. So we have 2 new boards to help inform these projects and inform how we think about our capital infrastructure. Part of that has affected the criteria that we use to prioritize those projects. So we have new and improved criteria. That's what we started that conversation about in February. We also, as part of those new and improved criteria, have a different grading system. So you'll recall, maybe if you have excellent memories, before we had project selection criteria, but it was like, check the box, yes or no. Is this okay for the environment? Yes or no. Is this, you know, I'm now forgetting what the other criteria, because I'm so used to the new ones, but we've really wanted to raise the bar and looking at these projects and how we prioritize them. Is this something that is really improving our conditions? So that's what we want to do with this year with the criteria. So the criteria themselves are very different than what we've done in the past. The other thing that's new since last time is in 2021, late of 2021 into 2022, we had a capital finance community task force. So they were volunteers, much like yourselves. Some of them were from other boards and commissions we have in the city. Some of them were community members who were not on the board. The mayor appointed this task force, and they provided some recommendations on what we should do for our infrastructure. We have so many needs, and in government, it's very common. We have more needs than we have revenue for. So how do we figure this out? How do we invest in stuff? Where should we prioritize? And the Capital Finance Community Task Force came forward with a couple of recommendations. I'm simplifying them here, but they recommended that in general, the city should do more to invest in infrastructure. And they really wanted us to do more than we have in the past. And they felt like in order to do that, we should pursue new revenue tools. They felt that we didn't have enough existing revenue or current revenues to be able to pay for all the things that we need in the community. So they wanted us to look at new revenue tools. They also stated that mobility and transportation were our first priority. So instead of kind of spreading the peanut butter out and trying to address everything at once in an equal way, we should really be focusing on transportation and mobility. And that's because every couple of years we do a community survey. We are finishing up that process this year for our community survey. And we've heard from our community year after year since we started this process that mobility and transportation are their #1 concern. And so that's why the task force said, we should do this, we should consider this as a first priority when it comes to infrastructure investment. And then, but parks and trails and also city facilities, municipal facilities are really important too. So they wanted us to address those as well and look at new revenue tools to be able to provide more for parks and trails and facilities. So those are some of those recommendations. So as we look at how do we form this CIP, what are the things we need to consider as we pick these projects? How do we prioritize? We wanted to take those recommendations from the task force. We wanted to look at those criteria, combine them together with things we've heard from the community, and also with a lens of what can we realistically do? Because we also, I say especially in Issaquah, we want to do it all. And we have a habit of biting off more than we can chew. We are eternal optimists, sometimes to our own detriment, and we can't seem to ever get as much done as we want to. And so we wanted to make sure that this was a little bit more realistic and that we were actually identifying the resources we need to get the work done and then not being overly ambitious.
And then just to add to Andrea's points as well, this is the first time I believe the city's gone to the boards and commissions to solicit the information. And it's very unique for cities to do that. Usually cities will have maybe a community planning process, community survey, and then develop a CIP from there internally. But here, we're really trying to make this the most inclusive CIP that we can by getting as many stakeholders, starting with the community task force last year, but also coming to you with the criteria and the project list and how we selected them, to kind of explain what our process is, how we got there, and how it impacts you as residents and citizens here. And it's been a very good process so far. I think this is what, the third or fourth board.
That's third.
Yes. And so that, going back to just the principle of equity, that's really something that we're really trying to focus on, is that inclusiveness of this process.
Thank you.
So new criteria. These may look familiar to those of you who were there for the February meeting, and there was a follow-up memo talking about what we did with the feedback we heard from you all in February. So this is where we landed with the new criteria. Each one of these has kind of a red, yellow, green threshold at how well the projects meet these criteria. So we looked at the projects for that 6-year plan. We wanted to make sure that each of those projects responded to these criteria in some way. So we have, you can see them here. I don't think I need to read them out loud, but there is more in your packet. So if you're wondering what those red, yellow, and green thresholds are, that's an attachment that's in your packet, so you can take a look at those. We will be referring to some of the ones specifically on equity this evening. And the feedback that we heard, especially from this board, was we had the equity criteria way wrong when we first came to you, which we knew we did. So we were very happy to have your feedback and incorporate that. And we'll be talking a lot more about that tonight. Any questions on, oh, I should mention, you may recall this last criteria, long-standing commitment. That was something that our council really wanted us to include in the criteria. And so they didn't fully define it. We don't have a definition for it. We have a meeting coming up with city council where they will be able to identify which projects meet this criteria. So they kind of have a better idea of this. It's a criteria they wanted us to include, but they also said, let us figure it out. So we still have conversations with council to figure that out.
Are they aware that we were concerned about it?
Yes, yes, I
all I
have
know.
passed on. Yes, I have passed on that information. I will continue to pass it on. I think it's really good feedback. The concerns we heard from many of you in February was that this isn't very transparent. What does this really mean? And the city council is going to have a public meeting where they talk about this in particular. So they'll have those discussions out in public. You can see how they're thinking about it. I think they're trying to make it as transparent as possible, but it's something that has been difficult to define to this point. So they have more conversations coming up about that.
Can I ask one more question
Yes.
about it? It strikes me that since that's more in council's purview, it's coming at the end of a rigorous process that you all have done with the other criteria. And so that also feels a little bit like rigorous process, something that's coming late, that doesn't have the same type of engagement and visibility for folks. So it feels like the optics of it feel really sketchy. I'll just say it very plain language. So I just want to kind of say that as well.
We had a lot of conversations, I can't speak for everybody in the city, but we had a lot of internal conversations with the executive office in the city about what is equity, what defines equity, how do we apply it? So there's no right answer sometimes, so that's why the board, in this case, it was very helpful to us to get a second set of eyes on it. Because we tried our best, but again, we don't have as much of the broader input. And so really, there was an effort made, just so you know, there's a very strong effort made, and then we brought it to you to get more of that information. That's why we made some changes.
And yeah, and I also, the next slide will show this better, but city council is adopting this document. They have the ultimate say in what's included in the CIP. And so I'm taking your note down. I'm going to convey that to council. But it's also their privilege to be able to change what's in the document at any time, because that is what they have been elected to do. So, but I will certainly pass that on to them. The other thing to note about these criteria is that we decided not to weight them. So not one criteria outweighs another necessarily, but it is something that we look at where in some cases, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, we do have to consider life and safety first and foremost. And so it just depends on how much of an issue of life and safety, or what is that legal mandate. Sometimes it does outweigh some concerns. Sometimes something is a life and safety concern in one year, but not in another year. And we think about the Black Nugget Wall. Are you familiar with this large wall above Fred Meyer, right? 5 years ago, no life safety concerns with it, right? 10 years from now, if we don't do anything, maybe we'll start to worry about life safety concerns. So things kind of weigh differently in different years. And so my point is, when we apply these criteria, it is much more of an art than it is a science. There are just individual conditions we have to consider. So we can't necessarily provide numerical values to these things and have it always make sense. Because we're looking at long-term planning, then 6 years, and really just trying to make sure we're applying them right. And so because it is an art, that's why we're here, asking you, did we get the art right? What's your feedback? Is there another way that we should be looking at this? So, we have, so this is an overview of the CIP. As I said, it's a 6-year planning window. And just in general, some themes I want to make sure that you're aware of. We have more funding for maintenance programs than in the past. That's something that we have heard from community and from council to make sure that we are maintaining our infrastructure. So that is a general theme in the CIP. This CIP also responds to feedback. As I mentioned, we heard from the Capital Finance Community Task Force to make more investments in our infrastructure while also taking extra care to make sure that the plan is achievable. And the way that we do that is by asking for more revenues. And so this CIP assumes and anticipates new revenues for transportation in particular. We'll be asking for a 0.1% sales tax to help fund some of our transportation needs. That's something that council and other, and we'll be discussing a lot more in the future to see if we get approval of that. But that's what we're proposing with this CIP. We also have been looking at our public safety facilities. And so we have a municipal court that is long past its lifespan, that does not have modern security measures in place, which we are concerned about. We have, and that's too small for a growing municipality like Issaquah. We have a police department that is only in half of the building that it was originally intended to occupy and has not increased their square feet despite us more than doubling in population. We have a fire station we need to build in North Issaquah. And we need to figure out how to fund that fire station. And by North Issaquah, I mean just north of 90 is where we're looking. And so, and then parks and trails. We've heard that we need to invest more in parks and trails as well. So we have a lot of different types of needs, and we are trying to figure out a way to raise revenues for each of these things to meet at least some of those needs better. Any questions about any of that? A lot. Okay.
Actually, I do have one more question. Has there been any talk about what the additional possible revenue streams could be?
Yeah.
That, because something that I have experienced in another city is that tickets has been a revenue stream for our cities.
Oh,
I'm so I'm hoping that the city of Issaquah is not looking in that manner.
No. In fact, no, we're not.
Okay.
We're not. I don't know that tickets would provide for a huge amount of revenue that we're really looking for that's gonna build a $32 million fire station. But no, it's a good question. Yes, we are starting these conversations now about what revenue sources we have. And the reality is in Washington State, we're very limited with what revenue sources we have as a city. And so generally, the two most common revenue sources are sales tax and property tax. And, each have equity implications, frankly.
Right, absolutely.
We are limited, so we are looking at different versions of that. That's why I mentioned the 0.1% sales tax already. We think that that's a good tool for transportation funding, because there's a lot of people who come to Issaquah and go to the Costco and access goods and services. They're all using our transportation infrastructure. Whether they walk, bike, drive a car, ride the bus, they're all using our transportation infrastructure to get to Issaquah, to access goods and services in Issaquah. So when they buy something that would apply towards sales tax, they're all also using that transportation system. So you come up with a system where users are helping to pay for the infrastructure instead of putting that entire transportation infrastructure burden on our residents and those who would pay property taxes. So that's one of the reasons why we're proposing a transportation sales tax. But property taxes too. There's some property tax forgiveness for low-income households, and so there's other considerations for that. So we're looking at all of that, but generally those are the two types of revenue sources that we would look at to pay for this type of infrastructure.
Okay.
And the sales tax, just to touch on the point a little bit, we estimate at least 40% of the sales tax comes from non-city of Issaquah residents. And compared to other cities, we're more of a hub for retail. So we have a lot of retail that, if you look at Sammamish, if you look at Snoqualmie, if you look at some of our neighbors, Newcastle, they don't have the amount of retail. So a lot of those people come here to shop. And like Andrea said, they use our roads. Or you look at our daytime population, you look at the people that are working here from REI now, from Costco, from Microsoft, they're using our roads too. They're shopping here as well. And so the sales tax can be equitable. The one thing is with sales tax, yes, it is regressive. However, there's most of the items you buy every day. If you go to the store and you buy basic goods, groceries, they're not taxable. So a lot of the items that you are buying on a daily basis are not taxable. Gas is also not subject to sales tax. That's a fixed excise tax, so that would not go up with anything that the city council decides to add. Okay. Transportation benefit district tax.
Thank you.
Yep.
Shay had a question online earlier, but I'm not sure if she still does.
Yeah, actually, you all answered the question about the sale, because my question was going to be about sales tax. And essentially, I also wanted to ask how you would develop buy-in from the community, because I find that community members often don't see the value in those kinds of things. and feel that it's unfair to tax them for things like that, despite the fact that they may benefit from it?
That is a great question and a challenge of us as municipal professionals. So the first thing we want to do is have a conversation. Well, if you have strong feelings, we'd love to hear those. But then we also need to have that conversation with our city council to see, is this even worth exploring further? We're proposing it in the CIP. This is a starting point for that conversation. And so if city council says, yeah, explore that further, then we need to have a lot more conversations, a lot more community conversations about, okay, well, what does this really look like? So some of the taxation methods, the revenue generating methods that we have require voter approval. And so nothing's going to get passed if the community isn't behind it, right? So we would need to have, you know, for some of these revenue options, we would need to have a lot of community meetings. We would need to have we do surveys, all kinds of outreach to see how does the community feel about this? What is the level of taxation that people are willing to pay for what amenities do they want to see? What particular projects? So no decisions have really been made at this point. This is just the start of the conversation for these things.
And we talked specifically about transportation. Again, back to Andrea's point, we're very limited on revenues we get. So the city and our staff really aggressively tries to go for as many grants as we can. Get the Federal Infrastructure Act that came out. We're trying to work with our local lawmakers to get that passed. The mayor's doing a lot of work with the National Conference on Mayors, the National League of Cities, to try to tap into some of those funds for our projects. And also tying the fact that we have a lot of mobility projects. We have a lot of green projects, trails, connections, pedestrian access on our busy streets here, trying to get some outside funding. But absent that, the funding from the state has dwindled over time. And if you look at the gas tax, we get a fixed percentage of the gas tax, excise tax back that you pay at the pump from the state every year. It's been decreasing for the past few years, even with the gas prices, even when they go up, it's been steadily decreasing because fuel efficiency is going higher. The state did pass a charge or vehicle charge for hybrids and electrics. And every year, if you have one of those vehicles that applies, you have to pay an extra charge to the state. However, the city receives none of that money back at all. Yep, the state is taking all of it. So that has also decreased our excise taxes over time.
Monica, was there another question? Did Christina have a question?
Jake has a question and Christina also has a question.
Do you have time for?
Oh, yeah, we have time.
Let's go ahead with Christina first, and then we'll go back to you, Shay, if that's okay.
Sí, estaría bien.
Ok, bueno, usted mencionaba que no tenemos el dinero, como ya se está diciendo.
You mentioned that we don't have the funds, like, you know, you've been talking about.
Y estaba pensando en qué tanto estamos, ¿cómo se dice? Integrando a la comunidad.
And I was wondering what type of inclusion is from the community.
Estaba pensando en mi participación que tuve, por ejemplo, en la escuela, cuando yo no sabía qué era el PTA o qué representaba.
And so I'm thinking in my experience with the school, I didn't even know what a PTA was or what it stood for.
Cuando estamos pensando en dinero, obviamente que todo se nos mueve el piso, ¿no?
And when we're thinking about money, you know, that's what really makes our world go.
Pero ¿por qué no aprovechar también, por otro lado, los recursos que se tienen internamente y relacionarlo con el punto de la sustentabilidad que viene también trabajándose?
And so why don't we use the means that we have internally with the sustainability issues or points that we already have?
Creo que por ahí se podría trabajar bastante y se podría reducir de una forma más consciente los costos que se tienen o que se podrían estar teniendo para la ciudad.
Perhaps if we look through that way of thinking, maybe we could reduce cost from the city, and that maybe that's the way we should go about doing this.
Bueno, yo he visto que en este país el voluntariado es muy valorado y he visto instituciones que lo están haciendo muy bien. Creo que
I
ustedes también han recibido ayuda de voluntarios.
I know that I know that in this country, volunteer service is viewed in a very positive light, and I know of different organizations that have used volunteer workers in a very positive way, and then you all are doing that too, I think.
Y espero entiendan mi punto, porque no solo lo quiero ver como que están voluntariando, sino que a la vez estamos haciendo un gran impacto en las vidas, porque se les está apoyando de una manera emocional también, y las personas se pueden sentir que están siendo reconocidas y que están volviendo a sentirse útiles y no solo recibiendo dinero del gobierno.
And I hope that you take the meaning that I'm trying to say here, because I
think it helps people.
I think it helps. It's been helping people to feel better about themselves and feel more involved with the community.
Sí, ese es el punto, simplemente buscar algo más íntegro, donde podamos también no solo pensar en crear más, sino que a veces el menos es lo más, desde mi punto de vista.
And so, yeah, that's just what I'm saying is that it is good to bring the people, the community in, to integrate them, because sometimes less is more. That's my point.
He visto gente que tiene grandes casas, tiene unas hermosas casi que mansiones y no se sienten a gusto. No están bien en nuestra comunidad.
I've seen people here in our community that own like beautiful, huge houses. You know, you could call them mansions, and they're still not half happy or comfortable within the community.
Y esto es parte de lo que estoy hablando, de pensar y entendernos, conectarnos realmente los unos a los otros y ver y hacer realmente ese cambio que estamos buscando.
That's what I'm talking about. You know, have that interchange of idea, be able to communicate within ourselves with each other, and that way we can achieve the changes that we're seeking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, Shay, let's go ahead and go to you for your question.
Yes, I wanted to ask if you could share any other ways you all use to gain funding aside from taxation.
So we can talk about that. I do want to make sure that we move on because we have a lot of other things to talk about tonight.
Okay.
So there are many ways that we raise revenues. The main ones are really property tax and sales tax. Those are our main revenues. There's many others we can go into. We don't have time for it all. We do also have to help fund some of these things. What we're talking about with city council next week is to sell some city properties. That doesn't require taxation. We don't have a ton of city property to sell, but we can do that. We have some. We have impact fees. So when there is a development in town, like with the new Costco headquarters, Costco helped pay for a number of the roads and road improvements around their headquarters. Costco pays any new big development that happens, they help pay for their impacts to the infrastructure. So they'll pay a fee for impacts to transportation, sewer, water infrastructure, even the use of government facilities to help support their facilities. And so, so there's different fees that we charge for development. You know, to use the pool, you have to pay a fee. So we charge a lot of different fees across the city. Many of those fees go towards operations of those facilities and programs that we offer. When we talk about capital expenses, these are big one-time dollars for certain projects. And so, so there's many ways that we can raise revenues. But we can, when we get further along, like I said in the beginning of this presentation, at this graphic, we're really just at that 6-year CIP planning process. So things are subject to change even within the 6-year plan. And there's a lot more conversations we need to have about revenue. And so I anticipate coming back here before we go out to a vote, you know, on any type of package or anything, and making sure that you all are involved and have the ability to provide feedback. But if it's all right, I'd like to move on. I do see that there is another hand.
I think it's left from,
Okay.
but we can check. Christina, is your hand up as a new question or comment, or is it left from the previous comment?
It is previous. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Shay, I just want to check in. Did I answer your questions enough for now?
Yes, yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, great. Great. So let's move on to the equity criteria itself and have a conversation about that, because I really think that you have a lot of expertise and perspective to bring to this. And frankly, nobody is going to look at this the way that you were going to look at it. So I really want to take advantage of your time tonight here. So as I said earlier, we had those red, yellow, green thresholds for what, for how to apply the equity criteria. And green, we've defined as the project improves equitable access to services and amenities for historical, underrepresented, or underserved residents. So we take a look at that equity framework that you have developed, and we think about who benefits, who is harmed, and so we need to look at, does this improve equitable access to those services and amenities for those who have been harmed in the past? That's really what the green is about. So it has to improve. And so when we looked at that and applied that green criteria, there is an attachment in your packet that goes through all of the scoring for the projects. So you can see how different projects scored against the equity criteria, and what was green and what was red and what was yellow. And so as we look at the themes from that process, of the projects that made it into the 6-year plan, many of the transportation projects scored really high in equity. And the reason for that is because we looked at where are there longstanding deficiencies in certain neighborhoods, different parts of town. Where are these longstanding deficiencies, and how can we then improve them? So that's why some of the transportation projects scored high in equity. And then also a trend, I'm skipping to the last bullet here. Also a trend is that we noticed that those projects that scored high in equity also scored high in community priority and livability and quality of life and our ability to deliver those projects. And I think that that's really good, because that means that not only are we trying to correct deficiencies in our infrastructure, and not looking at just gaps, but also knowing that it's a community priority. It's been adopted in other plans. We talked about those master plans at the top of that inverted pyramid, and it's been adopted in those master plans. It's been something we've heard from the community is important, and they also score high in equity. And so I just thought that was pretty cool.
That is.
It is.
And I also thought and that also leads to more livability, more quality of life. I mean, it just makes sense, right? But it's nice to see that it all scored that way and worked together that way. I feel like that means that we're on to something good. And then even better, that I was highly encouraged by, was that these aren't just projects that are necessarily we think we should do because they're the right thing. We think we should do because it's a community priority and quality of life. We also have a high ability to deliver on these projects. That means we have grant funding or other funding for them. We have internal staff capacity to do it. And so that means that we can turn them into reality, and it's not just ideas. And so I was very encouraged by that all of these things seem to work together and relate to each other. And in particular, what I would love to hear your feedback on tonight is I believe we took a conservative approach to scoring park projects in particular with equity. And I'm going to talk about that. So, park projects, again, that definition of making green, a green score, means that they have to directly improve equitable access for those who have been harmed in the past. That's really what we're looking at. So to score green, you had to do that. And for park projects, I think that sets a really high bar. And I'll tell you why. We look at, let's use the example of the community center. The community center is right outside. And let's say the community center needed a new roof, or the pool needed a new roof. Those are facilities that are used by everyone. So it's not particularly targeted at somebody who has been harmed. But if we look at fast forward into the future, if we don't maintain the community center, if we don't maintain the pool, and we have to shut these facilities down, who is the most harmed by the lack of maintenance? Who is the most harmed by lack of investment? People who can't afford other options. People who have country club passes or vacation home in Hawaii or whatever, they are not the most harmed. It's the people who cannot afford other options.
Right.
And so we chose a very conservative approach when we scored these. So park projects, like investments in the community center, like investments in the pool, unless they were improving ADA access, for example, we scored them as yellow. They weren't green up at the top, but we scored them kind of as yellow. We'll talk about yellow projects in a minute. But I wanted to, as we go to the discussion part of tonight's agenda, I would love to get your feedback on that. Are we applying these criteria correctly? Do you think that's the correct lens to not score those projects as high, to have a really high threshold when we consider how does this project improve equitable access for those who maybe have been harmed or could be harmed? So I'd love to hear your feedback on that.
I don't know if I'm thinking of it in the right way, but for me, the park and improving community center is very high because we are getting a lot more families that have low socioeconomic access. And because of that, they're not able to access as many sports in the area. So I see a lot of select teams, a lot of teams that are very expensive that a lot of our families can't access using our parks. And I'm assuming you're collecting fees on that to help us. But what I don't see is access for students who don't have money to use those parks in the same way, because we don't have things like Boys and Girls Clubs or YMCA, or our community center doesn't have like rec teams, organized teams. And so I'm struggling a little bit with the park project because I don't see representation. Like, I get that they, those families, you're talking about just general park, green space, but you're not talking about concrete examples where students K through 12 can go and access and get support. And that is very much lacking, in my opinion, in our city. We have a lot of access for families who can afford paying for services for that. So I'm looking at it more in that light. So when you're looking at selling city properties or you're improving transportation and parks, I'm hoping that all of that is also going to improve transportation and parks so that kids can get to a facility and use that facility to play games, to build community, to have access to sports. Also in the park area, like the community center really doesn't have any before and after school care services or daycare, which again is something like it doesn't feel like it has changed since my kids grew up here, and it feels like there's a greater need. So I feel like parks could score higher if it was looked at through that lens.
Thank
So
you.
you're thinking like having like better transportation for kids after school and more after school programs dedicated, like programming time at the new, say you're building a park, you're setting aside a field, what might be used for an outside third-party sports team, you're setting aside for a couple hours at least for.
And a facility for kids to access it and then go home to their apartments in Dallas or somewhere up in, in different regions, because right now they're very much trapped in their facility. So great, you get transportation to bring them down. To do what? What are they gonna do? Right? And so when you bring them down, we have to have give them the ability to access different spaces, what's the point? You know, besides that is mainly for their parents to go grocery shopping, but what can kids do? So kids K through 12, for me especially, I walk around, I drive around the Highlands and downtown Issaquah. I see a lot of lack of things to do for kids 6 through 12. And that is a big concern for me. And so when you talk about park, I want to know what exactly that means. And I see that it doesn't really impact what I want it to do for our kids.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I totally see your example of the community center, why the criteria might need some tweaking. And so I was trying to think of like, what is the reframing of the criteria? And I wrote this down because I might get confused in my head. So thinking about is there a disproportionate impact to not funding a project? And is the disproportionate impact on the groups that have been historically underrepresented or underserved? So that might be another way of looking at it, like with the, like the community center rough example.
Thank you.
And Andrew, Robert, do you guys have time for a few more questions? I think Shay had a question.
We have a few more slides, in fact. Yes, but I know that there's other things you want to get to, so I don't want to eat up all of your time, but I love the conversation.
Something like that. Follow-up conversation through email or something.
Yeah, what?
Well, please, we want you to get through your slides.
Okay, right, so, yellow, the project does not, so this is how we've defined that threshold, that yellow threshold. Project does not provide benefits or harm to underserved or historically underrepresented community members. So yellow is kind of like neutral, right? It doesn't specifically help, doesn't specifically harm. And most projects within that 6-year CIP overall scored neutral. So most of our projects are kind of neutral, this yellow color. But we look at what is in the CIP, and there's a lot of things that are general government purposes, right? Like equipment. So how is this bulldozer itself as a bulldozer? It's, right? How is this, how's the software program that helps us manage our finances? How does that really have impact, right? So there's 136 projects on our CIP over the next 6 years. Not all of them have that direct impact. They're all necessary for us to run as a city and serve you. But so there's a lot of them that were neutral. And importantly, no project scored red. So scoring red means harm, doing harm. So no projects were included that did any harm from that equity lens.
That's good.
So that seems like a basic threshold to establish, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So can you give an example of a project that scored red? Was it like maybe a parks project that was located in a very affluent community or something like that? Or what would be red?
I don't think we had any that scored red.
Okay.
Would a project, let's say like in the Highlands, well, actually I was gonna say hypothetical, but it isn't, where the Highlands got free Wi-Fi at Grand Ridge Plaza. In my mind, I think that probably should be red.
City didn't pay for that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. There we go.
So the Highlands has their own larger HOA type organization that provides for the internet service in the Highlands. I would also mention that there are a number of low-income households in the Highlands.
There is.
There's a lot of affordable housing in the Highlands. So 10,000 households, there's a lot of affordable housing in the Highlands. In fact, that's probably our highest concentration of affordable housing. So, but the city didn't pay for that.
Okay,
And the other thing is, if you consider investments in Central Park in the Issaquah Highlands, there are many soccer teams, or the community center operates summer camps, right? Many of them will go up and use that field. So it's not just for the mansions that live around Central
People think
Park.
of the Highlands, though, but that's what they think.
I know, but yeah, so, but we do look at things like, okay, the Highlands has had a lot of, that's a newer park. Central Park is
Mhm.
much newer, has had great investment,
Right.
than say Tibbetts Valley Park.
Mhm.
And so as we look at geographical disparities, areas that have had less investment, maybe, we want to focus on these other parks that haven't had that recent investment level the way that, maybe some of our newer parks have. So that's also things that we looked at when we were scoring things are, where are those gaps? Where are those disparities? And let's make sure we're addressing them.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'm just gonna scoot on, next steps. Where are we in the process? So we refined the criteria. We used those criteria to form that CIP. We're in that black boldened area on this slide. So boards are providing feedback. How does our draft CIP meet the criteria? How have we been applying it? Any feedback for us? Then we even start next week going to city council committees to talk about the different sections of the CIP. So next week I'm meeting with Mobility and Infrastructure Council Committee to talk about transportation, sewer, and water infrastructure. And then the council committees provide their feedback, and then we all get together at what we affectionately call the COW meetings. They are Committee of the Whole. That's what that stands for. It's not where we all like milk cows or anything. So a Committee of the Whole, that's all of council getting together to discuss the entire CIP. And that's when we'll talk about the whole thing together. And then we look at council adoption. We do have state requirement to adopt our CIP by July 1st. So that's what we're aiming for, trying to meet that state requirement. And that's the next steps. So we've been having questions throughout. I'm going to ask these questions again for you for any additional feedback you have to offer. How have we applied those criteria? If there were changes that we should consider at this point, let us know what those are. Preeti, I appreciate the language that you provided. Is there a disproportionate impact of not funding a project, and who does that impact really affect? I'd love to hear other board members' reactions to that language or any other feedback that you have.
I do have a question about the scoring. How has that been defined? Like, who defines? I mean, you gave us the definitions.
Great.
But when you're looking at a project, who defines? Like, is there kind of an internal equity commission that's saying, okay, great project, it's great?
So we have, part of that process starts at the very top of this pyramid. Oops. And looking at many of these master plans have projects in them that are suggested. So some of that process happens there. While we were in this light green box here of drafting the CIP, that was, first we had the project managers kind of self-score. They're the ones that are most familiar with the projects. So apply these different thresholds, let's look at their scoring. Then we had Robert, actually as CFO and the one who sees all of these projects, has more of an eagle eye view. He's not as vested in any one particular project, can make sure that those criteria.
Financial software system.
Well, financial software system. But that can take a look at it and say, okay, this person really, is this the right way of scoring this project? I'm not so sure. They might have inflated the score. Let's talk about it, right? And so Robert was able to just take a look at all of 136 projects and make sure that we're applying these things equally and that how we're applying them makes sense. And so working internally to do that. And then, so that was kind of our internal process. And now we're at that external process of going to 4 boards to see, did we do a good job? Are there things we should change? What do you think?
Okay, thank you for that. It's kind of scared me when you said the project managers just do.
Yeah.
I'm a project manager by trade, and we're just like, project, it's great,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great, let's go.
Yeah, I score an A on everything.
Yeah, exactly.
No, there was some critique applied and just, well, wait a second, are we sure? And, there was still the thought of, it's a starting place. looking at these criteria and thinking, okay, you know, how we apply them, and then what can we do, right? So.
How do, I don't know what they're called in the city, but how do the program managers, right? Do they have influence in this process? So for example, who's the person in charge of programs for Parks and Rec?
Mhm.
Right? How do they influence? Because that goes to your question. When they, you know, if they look at it and they say, I'm not so sure the roof matters because we don't have kids of color showing up, right? Or we have plans to do, you know, more work in the pool with, you know, expanding to who, but we're gonna need buses to get kids here. Right?
Mhm.
I'm trying to say, so there's like these great ideas up here,
Mhm.
but the people who fill that, are they involved in this process?
We had a couple of levels of involvement in the CIP. So, first, and these projects aren't just projects we invent
Right.
out of thin air, right? They're guided by a larger community process, and we created those master plans.
Yeah.
And so it's not just like somebody coming along because one person called them up on the phone one day and said, you should make this investment, right? That's not how it happens. But so we had the project managers take these plans and look at, okay, you know, this, for whatever reason, makes sense to do within the next 6 years. So they make the proposal. And then we have a larger team sift through those proposals and say, okay, looking at the criteria again and how they apply them, looking at what's our capacity to do, what do we have grant funding to do, what do we think we can get grant funding to do,
Right.
and then the feedback from the Capital Finance Community Task Force, et cetera. So all those things are kind of combined with this other internal team to form what's in that 6-year plan. Does that answer your question? So there's a lot of people internally that are involved.
Thank you.
And then the oversight happens.
That's it.
There's a lot of people internally that are involved. And then the oversight happens when we meet with you. So we've met with the park board, we've met with the transportation advisory board. We're meeting with you. Next week, we meet with the environmental board, and then city council.
Right.
So there's a large public process, a lot of ability for public oversight over the projects that are selected.
Right.
I did have one sorry. When we talk about areas within Issaquah, there was a focus on the Highlands. I would never have guessed that there's financial issues up there. I mean, low-income housing, things like that. So is there data that's able to segregate different areas within our city that we can, like Talus as another example?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that there'd be.
There is an affordable housing, there's a number of units of affordable housing in Talus as well.
So that might help from a strategy perspective, like let's take transportation.
Mhm.
If there's not efficient transportation in these areas that have low-income housing, that could be another lens that we can apply.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. So we have an idea of where these affordable housing projects are that we know are tax subsidized, that were part of like a development agreement between the developer and the city. And then we have census data that we can look at by census block or census tract to show us incomes. Because, you know, it could be, maybe you live in a fancy house, but maybe you inherited it from somebody and you don't actually make a lot of money, right? So we have, you never know. So we have census data to also help guide our decision-making. And we use them for our programs, and where we think about transportation or other type of services.
And does the city define specific regions? I just mentioned 2 of them, but how does the city separate regions? Is it
We have neighborhoods.
neighborhoods?
So we have defined neighborhoods in the city.
Okay.
And on our website, there's a neighborhood map showing how our neighborhoods have been defined. But even within a neighborhood, there can be great diversity, like in the Issaquah Highlands is a great example. And so that's when we rely on census data and known public housing projects.
And also, I mean, there's need even in the areas least expected. It could be, again, a senior on a fixed income. We have a lot more multi-generational households than we used to.
Yes.
And especially with the cost of living rising, we're seeing more and more of that.
And that's where census data really helps.
Yeah, Yeah, I had a question on the criteria. I'm not sure if it's for you or Monica or for someone else, but can I get a sense of like what the criteria were and the 136 projects?
Yes.
Is that data that's out there?
Yeah, so in your packet tonight, there is a link to the criteria and the definitions. I think that's the last item that's linked in your packet, so you can take a look at that. Then there is also in your packet a list of all the projects and how they were evaluated against those criteria. There's also a list of project summaries. So all that information is there in your packet. We also, because we just posted the CIP actually, if you go to the Issaquah website and in the search bar, right, capital improvement plan or CIP, our proposed CIP will show up in the search results as well. So if you wanted to see it all as that much more polished document that's all together, that's available as well. But the information you're seeking is in your packet.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like this was really well thought out and using a lot of the data, because I remember when a survey went out to the community and I see that reflected in this work. And so for me, community input from the start is always important, and I see that it definitely seemed like it started then, some of the concerns are embedded. And so I appreciate all of the very, because part of our conversations has always been, are they looking at different perceptions and different viewpoints? And I see that in your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any questions online?
I don't see any.
All right, so no questions online.
Okay, so I would love to talk about next steps. I will take the feedback that you've provided in your comments tonight and provide them to City Council in my upcoming meetings with them. So I'd love to include that as part of my presentation and written materials for them. And unless this board feels strongly that you want to communicate with them directly and you'd prefer to write a letter. So I want to help facilitate your feedback as best as I can. I don't want to dictate how you speak to council, but I'm happy to just, if it's okay with you, if it's easiest for you, I've taken your comments down and I can convey them to council on your behalf.
That sounds fine to me. Everyone in the room in agreement?
Okay.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your attention tonight. We went over a lot and all of your questions. I love questions and feedback. So really thank you for your time, and just appreciate you all here and the way that you're helping contribute to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
Robert.
All right. So our next item on the agenda today is well, actually, the next item is not applicable item. So our next item on the agenda today is the board processes and chair/vice chair selection percentage by Monica.
Thank you so much, Tony. So board members, it looks like we are okay on time. So if you feel like you still have energy, we can go on. I wasn't sure, and I still would like to ask the question. Within this agenda item, I have two items actually. So board processes, it was what I talked earlier in the meeting about the public members' comments that I wanted to discuss with you a little bit. So that I would estimate it probably takes us 5-10 minutes. And then this is May. This is your first I think, so we didn't skip that agenda item. Is just an informational item in your packet. You don't have a formal presentation for that. I'm gonna jump a little bit to what you said you skipped. So comprehensive plan overview. In your agenda packet, you have a memo from our staff, the manager, Stephen Padua. It's just an informational item for you. He didn't have any questions. They're still working on a lot of preparations, and they are scheduled to come to you as a board for actual feedback and input and the meeting in August. So for now, it was just like an overview. We are starting to work on it. We don't have any questions or anything substantial to you, but they will return in August. So that's that, yes.
You're welcome. Okay, so going on to the next agenda item. So I have about 5-10 minutes to talk about input received from our community member. And also this is the month of May. So this is the first time we have terms end and expire in April. In May, we have new terms. And also that's the time when we select new chair and vice chair. So if the time permits and you're ready for that, would love to have that conversation. Probably it's going to take 10-15 minutes. If you don't feel as a board that you have the time and energy, we can always postpone it for next month. But let's see how it goes. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay. So board process, I wanted to talk in an actual agenda item because I wanted to hear ideas and comments from you. But I spoke with resident Connie Marsh. You may remember Connie was also here a couple of months ago presenting, and then she occasionally provides input via email. In my conversation with her about the communications toolkit, she said that she also had a suggestion for you as a board, and I thought it was very intriguing, and I found it actually very helpful. So I said, oh, let me talk to board because I think they're going to be very open to that. And she gave the example as what happened at that meeting with the communication toolkit. Brief summary, we had Thomas, he joined, he presented, he had a presentation, he had formal questions for you, feedback, and then the item ended and Thomas left. After Thomas left, you as a board continued the conversation about the item and you told me to engage with Thomas. From a public perspective and from a public's meeting issue, this was the issue that Connie brought up, and she said, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not equitable. If you have a comment or feedback to someone, you should do it while they are present in the room, and you should discuss it at the item. When the item ends, you should move to the next item. You shouldn't have further conversation. So I thought I would bring this up to you. I know typically you are open to ideas and suggestions, but I realized that it sometimes happens that I don't think intentionally, but I did notice that sometimes it happens in our board meetings that we have an agenda item, we talk about it, people leave, and then, oh, let's talk about it again. And we probably should be more careful as a board not to do that. So do you have any thoughts, concerns, or comments about that? Anything that?
I think I lean into doing it because I feel like before I voice my opinion, I want to hear what the other members of the board are doing. And so the question, I guess, for me to learn is, it doesn't mean that everyone on the board needs to be in agreement. That is just my thoughts I need to, because I think this meeting today, and I think also with Stephanie, I think we discussed more clearly with them in the room, right, and what our thoughts were. We didn't have any conversation about what they presented after they left. But I think in our younger days as a board, I think we were still learning. And at least for me, I didn't feel like I could voice questions and concerns, but I completely hear her. And I feel like we are doing that, and we did that last meeting and this meeting.
Yeah, and thank you. That's a very valid question, and you're absolutely right. And sometimes it is a struggle because sometimes I hear, and you're absolutely right. If you make a recommendation, as you should be in agreement as a board, right? So then, if let's say Pretty made a suggestion earlier to Andrea, right, about reframing, in an ideal world, it probably you as board, you should have a conversation and say, are you all in agreement with this proposal, right? Or if, let's say, one of you asks, hey, Monica, can you add this to the agenda item? I will be looking at all of you to say, are you all in agreement, right? So you as an individual member can make suggestions, but you always would want to kind of like have formally kind of like agreement from most of you. But yes, and I'm so glad, you're absolutely right. I think as you grow and continue to grow as a board, you do feel more comfortable with whoever is in the room to look at your fellow members and say, okay, how are we doing? And having that conversation with the guests in the room, right? So, yeah. Great comments and great.
I also want to reiterate that it's important sometimes for us to voice different opinions so that the community hears maybe a lesser heard voice, being spoken and then discussed, right? So I think it's important. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes. It's important, and that's why for what I said, it's not that you always need to be in agreement for any type of feedback. You're absolutely right on that, right? So I hear that. I think it's just when you make a recommendation as a board, I think at least that's a discussion you would want to make sure that even if, let's say, you continue to disagree, that I'm not sure. That at least others heard you, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes for me, I feel like the guests like just leave kind of abruptly, at least for me. And so sometimes I need a little more time. Like right now, like a prime example was when we were talking about the virtual, non-virtual policy that we came up with, right? Like I didn't want to interrupt Mayor Polly, but she was also facing in that direction. And so she kind of just left. And so, but I felt like what I needed to say still needed to be said, right? Like I wouldn't have been okay with myself had I not stated what I stated.
Right.
And so it happened after she left, but I also didn't, I honestly don't know how I could have done it differently. So.
Also going back to when Police Chief Paula Schwarm was here, I honestly don't think I could have had that conversation with her. So I think there are going to be times for us to discuss a little bit more and they can come back because just to get our thinking on that, like, because we're processing, but I feel like we were also processing with each other and just thinking of our thinking, and it is a recorded thing. So we could have them back and like continue having the discussion because, or they could just sit there for the 20 minutes and have the conversation, like as we did the conversation.
Would you be open as a board to just even voice those concerns in the moment to say either ask them, hey, we need a little bit of time to process, you're welcome to stay, or can we just come back next month to you, or can we follow up? Or yeah, so just like, just address the time that you need more time, right? Because all of those valid points.
And with the communication presentation, I remember two things happened at once. We got the email about communication and you presented all at the same time. We're like, wait, now we're seeing an exact example of what you're talking about. And so then, I think we are hopefully going to be able to talk to the people. And I feel like we did at this meeting and the previous meetings, we're learning and we can do better. I think that's a good point. If I don't feel comfortable, if someone's like, hey, we just need a little one more meeting and then can you come back, or can you just hang on while we kind of talk to each other and ask one question?
And also your comment, Lucrecia, I think also, and as the board grows and as different departments who bring in items, I've been trying to work with them to make sure that they always have a clear goal and purpose for what they want to ask from you. So they have clear questions ahead of time at the end. So it's also clear for you as a board and knowing like, okay, what's being asked from you. But that also, like, you're right. There are times when like, oh, on my drive home in the evening at 9 o'clock, I still have an idea. So at least there's always going to be that option and possibility to have some sort of follow-up, right? And Shay, I see your hand up there.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say too, I think that sometimes our guests get hung up on the time. And although I know time is important to all of us and we all want to leave on time, I think it's important for them to understand that in some instances we can go over. There are options to move times further back if need be, or move conversations further back. And we often have a buffer that they may not be aware of. So maybe encouraging them to stay a little bit longer or give us some opportunities to kind of go through our thinking processes might encourage them to not leave so abruptly and not run away from us before we have a chance to really kind of dig into what they're asking about.
Great.
I feel this comes up for me pretty often when we reflect on equity related topics, is that at first there's like this just like weird feeling like something's not landing right. And it just takes time to unpack what it is. And you don't always know if it's gonna come, if you're gonna be able to articulate what's giving, or what's, for me, it's like what's causing an uneasy feeling. And that could be 20 minutes later, or it could be, at the next meeting, or shower, who knows, right? So I think there's some of that. for me, but I do appreciate the fact that, yeah, if we have feedback for someone, it does may land not very respectful to be talking about it after the fact. So I think we should try to figure out how to, even if it's later, to be able to provide that feedback to the individual.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for that great conversation. I just, yeah. I thought I would share it with you, and always appreciating comments from residents, and sometimes they come up with great ideas that we didn't think about, so. Okay, so next, selection of chair and vice chair. So Shay has been serving as the chair of the board, and Tony has been serving as the vice chair of the board. So much heart and work and commitment put into this. Moving forward, Shay has maternity leave coming up for a few months. She's expecting quite soon, in a few weeks now, right? How many more weeks? 5 weeks left?
6 weeks. 6 weeks, a little baby boy.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So with that, Shay would like to take at least a couple of months and spend her time with her family. Of course, she's gonna stay as a board member. She's probably gonna be attending virtually more often. But Shay expressed that she would love to provide an opportunity for others to step in as chair, as there might be others who are interested and have the time commitment. Had a chance to talk with Tony. Tony is also very busy, but very open to remain as a vice chair.
Yes.
Don't want to.
I was gonna say, feel free, go ahead, go ahead. I mean, I guess obviously, the obvious thing would be possibly a vice chair moving into chair. Unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to do that with my current job and my family commitments. So I would like to remain on as vice chair, but if someone would like to actually step up into my role, hey, don't mind, I have no ego, I don't mind stepping down. But I will not be moving into a chair role.
So thank you. And so with all of that said, board members, so if you're ready and interested, like the process is, we open the floor to nominate for a chair. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate someone else. And then we might have more than one nomination. Let's say if you have 3 members nominating 3 people, then you would have a discussion on that. And once you feel like you're ready for voting, you can formally take a vote or just have an agreement amongst yourselves. You don't need to use the actual voting system. And then we would do the same for a vice chair position.
So I have 2 questions. Can you remind me, Monica, if when a seat is vacated, if the alternates are brought into that seat that is vacated, or do they remain as alternates for the remainder of their tenure? Or how does that work?
And is this for general members in general?
Correct.
Yes, very good question. So actually with that, I'm glad that you brought it up because we did have some changes in seats. In the previous terms, Kelly and Pretty were alternate members. As both of their terms expired and we had a transition, Elisa as a regular member left, Pretty was moved into a regular position. Kelly remained into an alternate role, and Karthik coming in as just brand new, then he took Pretty's role as an alternate.
Thank you.
So that's the new configuration for the alternate positions and regular members. So that's great because, and great question, because it impacts typically alternate members cannot serve into a chair or vice chair position.
And then my second question is there anyone in the room or online who would not like to serve as chair or vice chair, so that we don't nominate someone who just doesn't have the time, doesn't want to do it? that sort of thing.
I think I would like to take myself out of the running.
Thank you, Lorna. Anyone else? Christina?
Yeah, me neither. Thank you.
That was really funny. Silence. Me either.
Like,
Well-
not it. Like, not it.
Well, I would like to try if you want to try Spanish, but sometimes just joking. Thank you.
So with that, any other questions, board members, before we open the floor for nominations?
Are there missing members? I'm not recalling.
Helen is missing. And I think that's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
Was she an excused absence?
Oh,
it doesn't matter.
I don't think so.
So can we nominate now?
Yes, if you don't have other questions, yes, please start nominations.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Preeti for chair.
Thank you. We have a nomination for Pretty for chair. Anyone else? Before, we need to also ask Pretty if she would accept the nomination.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Shay?
I also nominate Preeti for chair.
Thank you, Shay. We have 2 nominations for Pretty. Any other nominations or any other discussion if there are no other nominations?
I was actually going to second the nomination. Not there yet.
I'm kind of up in the air. It's like, pretty or Ray. It's like, I'll be the odd man out. I'm gonna nominate, since Pretty has already been nominated a number of times, I'm gonna nominate Ray.
For chair?
Yep, for chair.
Yes. Okay, Ray, would you like to accept the nomination?
I respectfully decline. Thank you, Tony.
You what? I guess we know who our chairs are.
Okay. Any other nominations before we go to second and discussion, I guess? Or actually, we should have had a second, like. Christina?
I would like to nominate to Kelly.
Kelly for chair?
I respectfully decline.
Okay. She respectfully declined, Christina, sorry. Okay, so we have Pretty. Any other nominations before discussion or second and discussion?
The Jeopardy music again.
Okay, so I think we do need to have a second. We probably should have had the second before discussion, but yeah, second and then discussion or any.
Is this my time?
Yes.
Second, please.
Okay. Any further discussion that's needed or anything else before are you all in agreement or?
I'll just make a comment. I really appreciate that these thoughts, input, research, and perseverance in many of the discussions. And so that was one of the reasons I nominated her.
Thank you.
I did nominate her, I seconded. So.
And I would like to say one thing as well. So, I was really just kind of up in the air for who should I choose. And it's not that everyone's not connected in every meeting, but I'm kind of a watcher, and I picked it up in my military background, and I always see Preeti and Ray just so connected to what's going on, and so like intelligent on their questions and their comments and whatnot. So I have the utmost confidence that I will take Preeti's leadership and serve you well as your co-chair. You're welcome. If you accept that. If you decide to accept.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that since I'm so new, I'm gonna abstain from nominating. Not because I don't think people here are worthy of being nominated, but just that I don't know people, so I hope you don't interpret that as like, oh, why is it not nominated? It doesn't want anyone to be chair.
Thank you, Karthik, you're awesome. Okay, board members, any other comments before you move on to voting? Or just agreeing, however you would like to vote, define voting. No other comments? Okay. So everyone in agreement that Pretty can serve as the next chair for the next year?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Don't see any opposed. Congratulations, Pretty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for staying on as Vice Chair.
Yes.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So the formal process with the vice chair would be to open it also for nominations. Is everyone in agreement? We can also just pass forward. Is anyone opposed to let's just put it that way. Is anyone opposed to Tony not being continue to stay the vice chair? Don't see anyone. Yeah, okay. Congratulations, Tony. Thank you so much for continuing to serve.
Looking forward to working.
I appreciate y'all. That was nice and smooth. I can't believe we are, I thought we would be like 8:30 already, so we are only about 8:03. We have 2 more agenda items, not big. It's just a brief staff report. And then other business and announcements, just basically we can update you on Juneteenth events, I guess. So I think in 2 minutes or less, we can be done if that's okay.
Sure, that sounds good.
Monica, do we want to talk at all about the reported hidden bias work?
You know what? I didn't put it on the agenda because the agenda was so full.
Sure,
But if you want to, we can do it impromptu a little bit to provide a brief update. If not, I was thinking just have a further along. But yes, Pretty's right. Pretty, Alyssa and I have been working, and Alyssa have been putting a lot of work, although she's no longer on the board, on the reporting hidden bias project that you self-identified as a work plan item. And so then hopefully with a little bit more time, we'll have a lengthier conversation, hopefully next month, and provide you an update on where we are, and even just some questions for you.
Sounds good.
So, yeah. A brief updates from mayor and city council. This is where typically I come and tell you like what else that's human services related, equity related in our department. We've been taking to city council. I do have a few human services updates for you. As I know that I updated you last week. Actually, do I have from last week? Because it's just a week has passed. We just recently, I updated you that we went to city council. So we are going back to city council and May 15 to formally seek adjustments to the Motel 6 project, the emergency housing project. But I updated you on that last week. So actually, I'm good with updates.
Oh, wonderful.
You just had a week to. I can tell you, we are now in the interview process to seek staffing for that project. So I'm very, very excited. Thanks to HR staff working really fast and having some pixie dust. And so we also had a great conversation in the past 5 days with some of you, Tony, Shay, Lorna. I feel like there's someone else from the equity board.
But Sharon was at the meeting, but she's not.
Sure, from the school district we have, wasn't it another equity board member? I feel like there was someone else.
We were talking about a pride event.
We were also talking about a pride event. So Ray has been taking a lead on the pride event, both coming up for June. You're right, and so you and I still need to connect on that. But on the Juneteenth, we have a small working group working on hopefully a Juneteenth event scheduled tentatively for actual June 19th. I heard back that community center might be an option for the event, so working out through those details. We are meeting now weekly to really work out the details of the event, and as a board, we will update you when we have more substantial
So it sounds like it's gonna be June 19 between 4 to 6 or 5 to 7.
So in the
Around
afternoon,
the
for sure.
late afternoon at the community
Center.
center. And we're looking at having some performances, some students either coming to dancing things, food trucks, and
I know we had talked about having something like a silent auction, but I'm not sure if that's even possible because we would be, I mean, that'd be more of a question for you, Monica, because as well as maybe other city staff, we could take in some monetary amounts for that. So I'm not sure if we can even do that.
The way we were planning it out for last year was that we as city staff, we were not gonna take monetary information, but if the art, let's say the artist was gonna present their art to have silent action, or whoever was gonna donate items, they were gonna be there, they could just facilitate directly this way, so we don't, as a city staff, we wouldn't take money, but, so there's a way to work around that if you want. And so I did reach out to the artist that provided the arts last year, and so they are working around their schedule. They were invited at another Juneteenth event, so they're gonna see what works out, but yes.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
And I know that Ray, rightfully so, was the lead last year in a Pride Month event. We had a great panel, virtual panel conversation, and you had some conversations already with potential other, the same.
Yeah, I reached out to a few folks and I really want it to be another robust online event. So I think I need to talk to you a little bit further. I have some folks from last year who I have not been able to connect to, but I just found out that there is a community event next door at the garage.
Yes,
It's an
the garage.
LGBTQ, which I plan to go to. It's next Wednesday, May 10th. And I would like a youth in this panel.
Yes,
I really feel like we need that voice. I think we had one last year, but I'd like to work on that a little bit more. So, there's a lot of stuff going on in the LGBTQI community these days that I think we're.
And I would recommend too, because it always feels very, for youth to be on a panel, it can be scary.
Oh, okay.
And so usually we recommend having at least 2 or 3, so then they have.
Absolutely.
Community,
Yeah.
yes. And a sense of community for our students is always
Okay.
safer.
In fact, I had a note to check in on with you, video connection with the school, if you had a recommendation.
I think starting with the garage is great, but this for high school, and I know several other high schools. You can contact the principals and see, look up the advisors, I can see if I can find that, to find out who the advisors are.
Yeah.
For those clubs, and see if any of them want to participate, but really importantly is to share the fact that there's an event.
Yes.
With students in those clubs.
So we have to pick a date.
Yes.
So we
So
can
once
make
you
sure.
have that, just, getting that information to the schools, to those club advisors, so that they can share it in school.
Mhm.
And at the same time, asking the students if they're interested in presenting.
In fact, one of the panelists, Monica, which, do I work with you on that to narrow this date down?
Yes,
throw
we
some
can work
dates out at
together.
each other?
Mhm.
Okay,
And even now, after the meeting, if you have 5-10 minutes, I think
Yeah.
we can go a long way.
okay, let's do that.
That event last year was really powerful, and I know the youth person there was amazing.
Yes,
I still remember. Yeah.
agree. Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
so we are done.
We are. All right, so let's go to our adjournment. So thank you everyone for joining online. We appreciate your attention, your comments, your questions, and just staying connected with us. Thank you very much, Shay and Christina. Thank you very much to our interpreters. We always appreciate everything you do to keep us all connected with each other. So thank you very much. So on behalf of everyone in the room, I consider this meeting adjourned. Our next scheduled meeting is currently scheduled for June 7th, 2023. All right, we'll see everyone in our next meeting. Have a great night. Talk to you soon.